I shall be discussing two films today. The Harrad Experiment from 1973 and, well, in particular, Harrad Summer from 1974. The Harrad Experiment is a basically terrible film about, well, it was adapted from a novel of the same name, I believe, and it attempts to deal with the sexual revolution, and there's this experimental college. It's Noel Marshall and Tippi Hedren later of Raw fame. Well, Tippi Hedren was famous beforehand, obviously, but they had a role in producing this film, and they also star in the film. For a film which might purport to be a more mature and less bugaboo take on sexual themes and young people premarital sex, it basically functions as one of these Mike Nichols and Carnal Knowledge-esque gross out comedies. Not gross out comedies, but these kind of adolescent juvenile sex comedies, and the likes of which would eventually give way to the gross out comedies that we know from the 90s and 2000s. Directed by Ted Post with photography from the great Richard R. Klein, The Harrad Experiment is not a film I recommend. I was watching it, and Noel Oakeshott happened to be over doing some editing on the PC, and yeah, we were both not very impressed with this film, I'm afraid. Now, the reason I wanted to discuss it is just to give some backstory for when we discuss Harrad Summer from 1974, directed by Stephen Hilliard Stern. We've discussed his film Draw previously on FOTD, and also photographed by the great Richard H. Klein. I'll read out some of Richard H. Klein's credits, because some of these are among my favourite works of cinematography of all time. Among the most interesting Richard Klein credits include two of my favourite films of all time in Mike Hodges' The Terminal Man and in Brian De Palma's The Fury, but I also happen to think that Richard H. Klein's photography is the really outstanding element of two otherwise not so great films. Well, one of them I need to revisit. Both of them directed by Robert Wise, actually. One is, of course, The Andromeda Strain, which I need to revisit. It's a film with able photography and a great mood, although I suppose you just need to praise it for existing, more or less. And then there's Star Trek The Motion Picture, which I really like a lot of the look of, although I frankly hate the pseudo 2001 A Space Odyssey angle which it goes for. People will say, oh no, Star Trek The Motion Picture is actually about this, and that's why I hate it, because it tries to be that, and it's terrible, beyond terrible and cringe and embarrassing at that, in my opinion. Effects are good, I guess. No, they are. Star Trek The Motion Picture is not that dissimilar to the Harrad Experiment, frankly, in its pseudo-sophistication. But then we have Harrad Summer. Harrad Summer is different in that it takes place on a break of the college semester, between the semesters, and we have students returning to their parents and informing them of what the college was like, and students attempting to host parties with some of their peers in the home of one of the parents, and yeah, there's a bit of a culture shock, let's say. It's a more interesting take on this idea, I think. Well, inevitably, because you get to... a dialogue takes place rather than this kind of banal echo chamber of bad comedy. Instead, we get still relatively kind of subpar comedy, although it serves a... It tries to depict a thought experiment, which I commend it for to some extent. I also thought Klein's photography was a lot more expressive in this picture. Perhaps Ted Post was a bit set in his ways, and he figured, no, let me do what I do, whereas Stephen Hilliard Stern was less of an established figure, and I think at the very early stages of his career, Stephen Stern had some pretensions of being an artist, and I imagine maybe he was interested in what a talented cinematographer like Klein was able to offer his picture. I don't know, I can only speculate. But the kind of thing you would hope one of these films to be, which is essentially some kind of window into the zeitgeist, or how a film production was trying to appeal to the zeitgeist, to capture the zeitgeist, I think Harrad Summer is the one that is of novelty interest in this respect. I wouldn't recommend Harrad Experiment, but interestingly enough, Harrad Summer, that's the film that I feel as though is of some interest. I viewed it because I was viewing the older films of Stephen Hilliard Stern. I don't remember why this was. I guess it would just seem kind of novelty and interesting to me. And yeah, I would have to say that Harrad Summer is an interesting artifact of the times. If you were to take a course or were trying to write a course for, an educational course to instruct people about how the sexual revolution was depicted in popular films of the era, Harrad Summer's I think that's a very instructive film to learn about what that was like, frankly. I think I certainly felt as though I was gaining an insight when watching it as to how this particular production wanted to depict the era, the conflict between the generations, and what it saw the viable, happy ending future as being. It's somewhat interesting. These things make it more interesting than Harrad Experiment, certainly. That almost treats the whole thing like a farce, whereas it's like Harrad Summer's the one that actually tries to take it a tiny bit seriously. I'm not sure why. Perhaps it was the fact that this film had an original screenplay and was not based on a novel. I don't know. I'm not. No disrespect. That implies I'm disrespecting the novel. Not necessarily. I know nothing of it. It's just maybe these film screenwriters who are. Oh, let me just double check. Excuse me. Mort For and Steve Zacharias just had interesting ideas. I don't know. Well, anyway, that's about as much as I can say about Harrad Summer. If you feel as though there's something more to be said, do comment on this video. My FOTDs are not. My videos are the beginning of an eternal discussion on the film in question, which will take place on this webpage. I like to think. Anyway, have a fantastic day, night, wherever you are.